City on the Edge of Forever is awesome. So a few months ago, I think in February, I read City on the Edge of Forever, and City on the Edge of Forever, and also City on the Edge of Forever, and a giant essay about City on the Edge of Forever. They were all in this book called City on the Edge of Forever, and the reason that there's so many different versions of it, and the reason that there is this big essay where Harlan Ellison gets pretty emo about his experience, is because it's one of the most controversial episodes of Star Trek ever. It's also one of the most beloved episodes. It comes from the first season of the original series, and it's amazing. It's a story of time travel and of humans and what they do and why they do it, and when's the right time for high ideals and when is the wrong time, and how you try to make things right, and it's not always a good idea. I'm not going to bore you with all of the details of the drama between Gene Roddenberry and his folks and Harlan Ellison, but suffice it to say, Harlan Ellison wrote and rewrote, and in the end, Gene Roddenberry's people did a final rewrite which turned into the filmed version. The conflict mostly comes from Harlan Ellison and his idea of who Kirk is versus Gene Roddenberry's idea of who Kirk is or should be. Roddenberry really wanted Kirk to be more or less infallible. He wanted him to be human, but he didn't want him to have big ethical dilemmas all the time. He didn't want him to have struggles like a lot of people do, and he didn't want him to ever try to do the wrong thing for the right reasons. So there are a few big differences that matter between like the scripted version and the final like shot version. The biggest ones are just in what happens how. For instance, the whole story was supposed to be about a Starfleet officer or enlisted person who's on drugs and then gets put to death because he kills somebody on the Enterprise, and that's how they get to this time shifty place with the gate. Of course, Gene Roddenberry didn't think that anybody would be doing drugs at that point in history, which I think is really, really naive. But instead of that, you get Bones accidentally injecting himself with a lot of stuff, which seems like a really dumb move for a doctor, and that, I think, is a legitimate criticism from Harlan Ellison. But it all amounts to they're going back in time and trying to prevent something that changes the future. And that change is one woman, and whether or not she lives or dies. The back in time portion takes place just before America enters World War II, and Edith Keeler is a peacenik. She wants everybody to get along, and if she lives, America's entrance into World War II is delayed, and the Germans discover like nuclear bomb technology first, and that changes the entire course of history, and probably not for the better, because, you know, the Nazis win World War II, and that can't be good. The big difference here is that in Harlan Ellison's original version, Kirk falls in love with her and wants to try to save her. He comes to understand that that would mean the Nazis win, that everything in the future would be different, that none of his friends would have been born, or if they had through some fluke, they would be very different people, even if they were genetically identical, and that the world and the universe, and at least the galaxy, would be forever altered for the worse. But in the filmed version, Kirk knows all of those things, and he doesn't try to save her. He stops Bones from saving her life because he just knows that that's the right thing to do. And certainly there are really compelling moments. I love Edith Keeler's speeches, which Harlan Ellison didn't write and thought were terrible. I love the whole notion of replacing I love you as the three most important words, replacing that with let me help. That's just brilliant. But I do agree that what we could have seen from Kirk if this were canon, what we could have seen was Kirk being in love completely and totally, and not just a port in the storm, and not just loving green women, and not loving himself, but loving another person truly and deeply, and what that does to his character. And that's not something that you ever get to see in Star Trek, because this isn't canon because it was rewritten. You also would have gotten to see Spock call Kirk Jim in the first season, and then potentially never again. But it shows a very good, strong relationship between these two men that takes a long time to build without this story, without this piece of it. And it really makes me reconsider all of Star Trek in some ways. So if I watch Wrath of Khan and Spock says, "I have been and always shall be your friend," like, that hits me even more because I remember the scene that never existed wherein he said, "Jim, it's okay." But I am at odds with Harlan Ellison in saying that the filmed version was terrible. Certainly it's not the version that won him an award. It's not the version that he believed in. It's got flaws. It's got a lot of trouble with it. But the filmed version is a classic for a reason. It is beloved by so many people, not just like Star Trek fans, not the hardcore folks, but just lay people, just science fiction fans. It's a good time travel story. And it is a good story. And it's moving. And Edith Keeler says amazing things. And Spock says amazing things. And he's trying to make, radio something or another with the bear pelts. If you've never seen Star Trek, or you've never seen the original series, never really given it a chance, I would say watch City on the Edge of Forever. Read City on the Edge of Forever if you want. It's really interesting to see the differences. There's some really moving and amazing differences, like, that you've lost if you've only seen the filmed version. But if you do nothing but watch the filmed version, do that, because it's so good. It's just tremendous. It's one of the best episodes of anything ever. And I want you to watch that and experience it, and I will see you later.